Welcome to the workshop here at Hail and Horn 2025, the Yggdrasil year. This is going to be about heathen or Germanic tree cults in heathen ancestry or back in the day. The focus is going to be principally on how were sacred trees treated in society, right? In Germanic society, for as far back as time immemorial, right up until today, right? Because there are still trees that are being worshipped or at least venerated or are parts of communities in the world. The information I'm going to be sharing is primarily based on an article that I did write for the Older Journal, Volume 2, which is Tree Cults in Frankish Heathenism. So the vast majority, the kind of groundwork, I am going to talk about the Franks, but then I'm also going to branch out into Scandinavian and so on, right? So from beginning around the 4th to the 7th century, the coalescing of the people who became the Franks. They were a Gallo-Germanic, Romanish peoples conglomeration that did have a very strong worship of trees, right? So much so that in the 4th century, Martin of Tours, holy man, went up into Gaul, and there was this famous episode where he comes to a group, well, basically a village, and they held this one tree to be sacred, and they gave offerings to it, a large pine. And he said, and according to his biographer, Sulpicius Severus, he said that the people, like after the tree fell, Martin had the tree fall down, and reluctantly, even though the tree fell, the people still continued to worship at that site, right? And regardless, even if it became a church site, they continued to worship there. In the Council of Orleans, later on, there's the church councils, basically extolling people not to do things that are pagan. And one of them was not to have feasts in honor of trees, springs, or stones. Same thing with the Council of Braga in 572. No one shall light torches or candles at trees or fountains or stones, for this is idolatry. In 597, Gregory the Great, Pope, wrote to Queen Brunhilde of the Franks, warning her to forbid the worship of trees and sacred stones, rites which are still being performed by the people. So this is, largely 100, almost 200 years around post-conversion, and people were still worshiping at these sites. So in doing the survey historically of all the various trees that were worshipped or given cult in some capacity, there are 6 characteristics that come up. One, that the tree itself is divine, right? So there is some type of divine, godly, what we also call wights, Wights, Vatir, sometimes Alvar, elves, that are connected to that tree. And that at those trees, oftentimes there were vows that were spoken at the tree or to the tree. Also, there were places of focuses of courts and law, right? There are a lot of examples, like at Runnymede, right? There was a tree. If we think of like the royal oak as well, and so on. There were also places where people held feasts, so they would feast at the tree or around the tree. They would give offerings of food to the tree. The trees also had healing powers or they had some type of curative nature. So even when the trees went from being worshipped from a heathen context or a pagan context, post conversion, those trees, if they became rededicated to other saints, they just got rolled into the power of the tree itself, regardless of which holy power was being recognized there. And the sixth one is that the trees they could be considered wild, uncultivated trees. Typically, these were trees in which already existed, like people didn't plant these trees, right? They were there, and communities brought the trees in, or they formed around the tree, and they were not like a cultivated variety. Like it wasn't really like your apple tree that was the village tree, right? There was the tall oak, the yew, the pine, and they were also oftentimes not a fruit-bearing tree in the sense of, like again, apples and so on. A couple of examples of trees that existed around that were named and had personalities, even post Christianity. There was Fimaike, anyways, the Femic oak in Earl, Germany. The name means the secret tribunal oak, or secret court oak. It was known as a justice tree for the Vemic court. The tree was over 600 years old before it ended up dying. Then there's also, curiously, in Switzerland, the Napoleon's Linde, or Napoleon's linden. In this case here, there was multiple ancient linden trees that bear the name of Napoleon. Very fascinating. And that in folk memory, it was the belief that that is somewhere where Napoleon rested, right? But these trees were already important, like regardless of Napoleon, but they were ascribed very much like if you have like Thor's oak and then it gets reascribed to another saint or a saint. This also happened for important people, especially around law. There's also in Brittany, France, the Barenton oak, associated with La Fontaine de Barenton, a sacred tree that stood near the spring where it was believed that Merlin was said to commune with the Lady of the Lake. The tree was believed to murmur prophecy or to know certain unknowable things, and people who would travel to it would leave little offerings into its bark, sometimes a coin, sometimes a nail or something of the like. But yeah, and they would whisper questions to it. Germany also had the Tanzlinde, or dancing lindens, such as in Bohemia, where these lindens, there was like dancing and assemblies, and it was kind of a place where they would hold dances, get-togethers. The Royal Oak of England, King Charles II, allegedly he hid in the tree during the Battle of Worcester in 1651. Yeah, and it had a personality as a guardian of the rightful king. In France, there was also La Chaîne des Partants, or the departing oak, in Normandy. A large oak that soldiers, when they were departing the war, they left tokens in the notches of it. And it is believed that that tree stood vigil over them and also had a kind of like was a remembrance tree. There were also various trees that were known as like thing trees throughout Scandinavia and Germany. They could be oaks, lindens, or ash trees. Sometimes they were part of local legends, again, but there were places where laws were declared. There were also one of the Louis, and a long line of French Louis, had some trees that were named after him as well, because that was the court tree. So people would go and And if you read the Song of Roland, right, which is a courtly romance lay, medieval French lay, in there Charlemagne assembles everybody under the tree, right? So you can see where the tree is directly connected with society. If we look at, yeah, so for the court trees, the assemblies took place there. Law speakers and disputing parties would gather there and hear cases. And if we're kind of looking at parallels with Yggdrasil, the tree was the center of the community, the center of justice, the center of society, and was treated like a member of the community. Very much how Yggdrasil does feature in Norse myth, kind of, is this the center that everything is ascribed to. The gods travel through it. We travel through it. Vows are made at various parts of it, and so along. One of the most interesting for me attachments of the tree is there are a couple of excerpts that I found really fascinating when it came to kingly power amongst the Franks. So the Franks, they had certain conditions for them to be able to legitimately be Merovingian rulers at that time, right? So they were Christian, but one of the conditions was they had to have long hair, right? If you had short hair, you could not rule as a legitimate king. And this was actually a way for people to step out of being rulers or so on, or step out of the game, if you will, is that they would tonsure their hair, or somebody would tonsure them, and they would go chill in a monastery for a couple of years, right? Just take a break. In one of those excerpts, really, really fascinating. It was I believe it was Childeric, but anyways, one of those kings had his hair forcibly tonsured, and he made the mistake. Well, him and his son made the mistake of saying, "Well, the head that you've just shorn grows on green wood, and soon those shoots will grow again, and so your hair will grow again." Well, that's a great way to lose your head. So, and it's happened to in many cases where that's exactly, people died. There was also, with regards to kinship, there were certain rituals in Merovingian society where it came to inheritance laws and being within and without kinship. And one of those things had to do with something was in Latin called the festuca. But the festuca, now, it may be a bundle of straw, but it's more likely, and there's a lot of evidence towards it being an alder twig, right? And in this one proceeding, it says, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't want to search it all up, but that an assembly is made, that people come, that there are 3 people that are going to speak on their behalf, that you are transferring your inheritance or your property over to the next person. And in that ritual, they would take this twig of alder branch and they would throw it in the lap of the other person, right? And that person then, all that inheritance came to them. So it became symbolic. It was symbolic of the kinship relationship. And, there's no real explanation as to why it would have been alder specifically, but through kind of a more experimental kind of practice, the green wood of the alder, when you do shave it, it oxidizes quite quickly, right? So it turns red. Now, in some practices and some beliefs around various ecstatic rituals, it is believed that that does have a connection with blood. So could be. The I think for me and what this all kind of means moving forward as heathens, I don't think that there's enough emphasis that's put on the tree. You know, we talk a lot about Yggdrasil, we talk about the cosmic pillar, but I feel that we've at times become detached from building a community with a tree, right? As being a part of our family or society. Because the trees bear witness on that society. They provide shade. They, you know, yes, trees do provide wood as well too. You know, it's very important. But there's one tree that's really important. But there's an opportunity for us to be able to reconnect in that way. I think here at Ravensknoll, a great example of that, and one that we've been able to kind of do is near the standing stone. There's a tree there. It's a poplar. The poplar broke and fell down, and so on. But there's a new shoot that's growing, and that poplar tree is where when we had Welland Tree Gathering with Nerthus, that tree was then representative of that space and kind of a connection with Nerthus. If you're not familiar who Nerthus is, a earthly goddess with Vanic qualities, who was described by Tacitus in 98 common era. And there was this whole thing about, like, you know, she had a wagon, an idol, she was processed around various communities, bringing peace and frivolity and all this stuff, and largely for fertility rituals, and it returned back to that sacred well. But that's one way that we've been able to kind of do things here. Another way that we've kind of connected with the tree is like this weekend when we were redoing the vey and the vey bonds, right? And the vey posts. Well, those posts, yes, they're cut, right? But they do come from the land. And we were ascribing different runes on them to represent different gods and beings and worlds. And that's one way that we can connect as well. The god poles are trees, you know? So yes, again, they're cut. They're not the natural living tree, but even in historic cases, like when the church kind of started relaxing on cutting down holy trees, they're like, you know, we're not going to cut down and completely destroy people's holy sites. One, it doesn't work, and two, it's like really bad press. But we're just going to rededicate them. And so the wood from some of these trees was incorporated into building churches and so on, or carving new idols. Sorry, I forget what the church calls them, but saint statues, icons. Sorry, yeah, icons. You know, and the people's connection to those trees were still met through that. Yeah, so largely people and communities within Germanic society and largely broadly European society have had not only a cosmological connection with the tree, such as was talked about in earlier workshops, but also the tree was a part of us, right, as people. We do know through myth, you know, Odin, Vili and Ve, or Honor and Lothar and Odin, you know, came upon two pieces of driftwood and was like, they have great personality, you know, let's make them people. And that driftwood, so like we are connected to the tree through driftwood. A very fascinating example out of I believe it was in the history of the Franks, Gregory of Tours. He speaks of a duke, a Frankish duke, very bad guy, not a good guy, He was a very bad guy. His name was Rausching, which means like smoke or like reeking, like the German word for smoke. And sometimes when you're reading these histories, you're like, there's this history, but you're kind of peppering in there's some deeper mythic stuff in there. It's just been like buried quite a bit. And Rausching loved to cause a lot of pain and torture people, and like it was just, and he treated his well, back then they had slaves. He treated his slaves very badly, and two of his slaves decided to get married because they loved each other, and they didn't get his permission. But as far as I remember, they did have some permission from the bishop to a certain degree, but they ran away, they eloped, and they got married. And when Rausching found out, and he found them, he had a tree trunk split in two, hollowed out, and he had them put together in the tree and buried alive. Right? So they could be together forever. Oh, they want to be together forever? They could be together forever. Now, after he buried them, the bishop was like, you are insane. And when they exhumed them, only one of them had survived, which is super tragic, but sounds a whole lot like post-Ragnarok, with Lif and Lif, what's the names again? Lif and Lifafnir? Lifrisa, yeah. Post-Ragnarok. Yeah, so it's very fascinating. So like a lot of these stories of like people being in trees, hiding in trees, having some type of power within them. There was another example where there was a tree that was, it was a holy tree. It was struck by lightning. This is somewhere, I think, in Belgium. Anyways, it was struck by lightning, and all of a sudden there was a statue of a saint on the inside. Right? So it was like, okay, cool. Which was amazing as well. At this point, does anybody have any questions or anything? I'd like to leave I think we have 15 minutes, just kind of open it up. You're going to ask your question. I'm going to repeat it loudly so that the camera can pick it up.
Have you come across any connections between the green man or the emerald man? You know that leafy face you see on churches all the time?
Yeah. So have I seen any connections between the green man and tree cults?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the green man as a motif is not as old as we would think, that it was part of some folk cultural kind of revival, but there are stories and so on. I would say at the surface, obviously there's a connection because it's a leafy oak looking man. It's a tree man. And even though sometimes these are later kind of folk revivals that took place, in the 1800s and so on, and a bit later, that they come from somewhere, right? So I think there's just that kind of connection. We see our reflections in the trees. Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. The name of the tree for Merlin. Gotta scroll back up into my notes. That is the Barrington Oak. BarentonOam. Oak. O-A-K. Yeah.
Why trees?
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
I know.
Why trees? Right. Well, was that all of your question? Okay. I don't want to get to why trees. Well, to be honest, it's not just trees. It's trees, stones, and bodies of water that were focal points for community activities, right? That had social implications, not only just religious implications. Trees, I think, were largely singled out because they're very powerful in the psyche of humans. They connect heaven and earth. They are a pillar. They're all these things. And it was so strong in the pre-Christian cosmologies and beliefs that it was something that the church had a hard time like running up against. And because of the ongoing struggle that the church did have with a lot of these sites, it kind of backfires, right? So people kind of like dig in, thinking more. Plus, with the healing aspects of the tree, like the curative powers that were associated, or fertility as well. Again, I don't remember all the names, all things, but I've done a lot of reading on it. There is one tree, again, somewhere, either Germany or France, that was believed to be like be grant fertility, and people would go to the tree and they would take a little piece of it, a little piece of it, a little piece of it, and to the point where like it's just like a little nubby stump. But people have like taken little pieces or shaved off pieces of the tree that they would then mix with, I believe it was water or maybe wine at some point. But yeah, and I do think too, like the tree, you know, if we do look at from a kind of a mythic standpoint, like yes, with the driftwood and so on, like we were connected there. But you know, the trees and humans definitely have a lot of things in common. We have hair, trees have leaves. We have limbs, trees have limbs. You know, we stand tall and erect on our feet. You know, so do trees. You know, and it's been the same, and it goes so far back that every single culture that has a tree, or peoples that have a tree from beginning of time till now, like it's important and significant. So yeah, that's my take on it. They're very important for all those reasons.
Thank you.
Yes.
In thinking about inclusive heathenry and our responsibility to things like racism, place, all those things, I'm curious what's your, not to put you on the spot, what's your take on our responsibility to trees?
Oh yeah. Wow. I have. So what's my response? What do I think as being inclusive heathen or inclusive heathenry? What is our responsibility to trees? Extending that to trees. Amazing. I think that trees, not just like, I understand that there is a need, there is a true need to harvest trees, right? I do much prefer some of the ways it's done selectively and forest management, right? Managing a forest it's a thing, right? Forests have been managed for millennia. This thing of like just letting a forest grow and fall over and trees and rot, and like fire hazards, like people who've had a long-standing relationship with forests did not do that, right? They would pick the wood up, they would use the wood, you know, so there was some type of management there. I do feel that trees that are of a significant kind of like cultural heritage standpoint, like there are a lot of trees in Canada that were like trading trees or meeting places. They had significance. Or like that really big old tree on somebody's farm somewhere, you know, like if a tree's made it that long, right, it's seen some stuff, it's got a story to tell, and I feel it's our responsibility to treat that being with that dignity and offer it some form of protections, even so far as some form of agency about it. You know, so like, hey, if you cut down like a random tree in the forest that was quote unquote not significant to a lot of people, like I know it kind of sounds bad in that regard, but like, okay, you cut a tree on public land, probably not a good thing to do, right? But if you cut down the town's tree, there should be significant repercussions for that, whatever that may look like. Go plant 10,000 trees now. Right? That's my take on it. There's room. Yeah. Yes.
Just speaking to that, and to just add to that, yes, in a significant amount of trees that are ancient and still here today, where they're standing for 3,000 years, 600 years, 800 years. A lot of those trees also may have been, especially in like speaking to like North America, where there's things like black walnuts or hickory trees and things like that, where they were significantly large, and they also centered around not only the wildlife but the persons who could take that. And so if any of those were lost, those aspects, they're quite large and they're quite significant. So then they would be integrated into that kind of mythology, and there's always one that's like born of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Like there always seems to be like the seedling that sprouts out of the ancient tree that stood there for like 300, 600, 800, thousands of years. And some of the trees, they do and have and are extremely ancient.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Quite significantly ancient. And that's quite incredible when you think of that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree. Anyone else? Question? Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, like, some of the runes are associated with specific trees, and I wondered if there was, like, a historical Norse perspective, for example, about, like, why birch trees are particularly important, that one is a rune. Like, is it just that was common in that region? Or is there a particular significance to those trees that are symbolized in the runes?
Yeah. So what is the connection between runes and specific trees or tree species, such as the birch? So the birch tree does have a lot of folkloric connections, for sure. Oftentimes they are connected with more of a matronal kind of feeling or energy, if you will. Like birch trees, if there's some form of personality that's ascribed to them, are oftentimes like feminine. And also birch trees are extremely holistic in that you can do a lot with them. So yes, the bark can be used for obviously writing and so on, but you get various forms of pitch from them as well. You get the wood is easy to carve in. You get like a sap from it as well, like a birch water, which is also very healthy and good for you. They're a tree that is really good for like pollarding as well. So like taking you cut the top of the tree and you lay it down, and you kind of make like hedges and fences and so on. They're good for that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of uses to it. I mean, same with ash trees as well. Like ash does have. There's an important tree custom that's like, anybody ever hear of a passing through tree? Passing through tree, yeah.
It's almost like a magic door.
Yeah, so like a passing through tree will be a tree that will have like either a branch that kind of connects back down onto itself, or a root that's lifted up, but it's got some type of like passageway. And there was a belief that you could take a child or a baby and you pass them through the tree, and then they would gain health, or they would be looked after. And then if I'm not mistaken, that the tree also had to be protected, that if something happened to the tree, it could impact the child as well too. read that in the paper somewhere, but yeah. Yeah, so there is connections to various trees, absolutely, in species. Like oak. Oak is very associated with Thor, right? Like Donar's oak, right? Which was one example of a tree. And it was also very much connected with, Jupiter, with Hercules as well. I know those are quote unquote classical gods from the Mediterranean, but those gods or aspects of those cults did move their way up. Like we have cult sites in Germany that are Syriac mystery cults, like Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, Dolicanus, right? Very complicated ritual kind of areas, but it came from Syria. Right, fascinating. Yeah. Yes.
Do you get a sense, like when we kind of think about like the world tree and the legends that go with that, and kind of it taking many forms, like it's a connecting point, but it's also like a way to pass through different realms of time, like and kind of different interpretations and realities of it. Like, do you think that's a reflection or like an amplification of kind of the day-to-day realities of relying on trees, of them shaping our world, building our houses out of them,
Right.
eating their fruit. Like,
Yeah.
do you think that's kind of hand in hand, or
So is the kind of the reverence that we're showing towards trees, is that reflective of our need of reliance of trees? Right. Yeah, like I do. I do think that there is an importance there. Like if we look at groves, right? Like back in the day, like the various quote unquote sacred groves. Those trees were important. They housed like sacred spaces and temple. Like they would have offering spaces, but you know at the same time, when you're in your house, they there was this concept of the roof tree as well too, or like the tree that kind of grew within the hall, right? Or was connected to the house in some way, which was really important. I believe they're called Gardorven in Norway. Like the tree, like the farm tree. Also the Swede, if I also believe it was the Swedes, could be the Norwegians as well. The tun tree, or the town tree. Yeah, I do think that there is a reflection there. We do depend on various aspects. If we look at ash, ash is great for making spear handles, or like hafts for spears, or axe handles, and so on. We rely on it, and the ash tree is one of the most significant species of tree in the Norse cosmology, with his association with Odin. Right, there was a general, if you will, Frankish general back. I think it was like the third century, second or third century. Anyways, his name was Ascarik, and Ascarik translates as like powerful ash, or spear ruler, and his brother was Maroger, which means famed spear. So like and so people oftentimes were so reliant and dependent on trees, even bridges, crossing waterways, in a lot of ways. So yeah, I do think there's a reflection for reverence for trees, based also on how much we rely on them. Yeah, I do. Yes.
with the trees being the genesis of people, is there anything historical to people claiming lineages from trees?
Is there any historic instances of people claiming lineage from a tree? kind of like like the royal genealogies that go back to the gods. I'm going to say I have not seen that, but I'm surprised that I haven't seen that. And maybe I just didn't come across it. But there definitely is, like, trees were a part, like, if we think of, like, today, like a family tree, like it's right in there, like family tree, you know, it's so baked in the concept of kinship and trees and people and relations that, yeah, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it may have happened. If not, why not? You know, what tree do you descend from? You know, yeah,
It's a very braiding sweetgrass kind of idea.
exactly, absolutely, and that's the great thing is that, like, we can do that. We can do that. There's nothing stopping. And if you were to tell me, you know what, my great ancestor was an oak tree, hell yeah, rock that. You know, because there's so much power in that statement too, right? Because it's not much different than, you know, back then people being descended from XYZ god or XYZ emperor or whatever. How many people here are descended from, you know, this king or that king? And it's one of the first things that people will say sometimes, like, oh, I'm like the, you know, 50th descendant of, you know, this emperor or that king or that queen. You know, because it's cool and it kind of ties you into that flow, if you will. So I think that's a really good idea. Yeah. Yeah.
How, in your opinion, how do you think we should take what we know about historic tree worship and adapt that into a modern practice in especially the North American community, where
100%.
we don't have, like in Europe, there are still sacred trees that stand.
Yeah.
But we don't have that established tradition here, of course.
Well, okay,
In a
so
European context.
yeah, New York. Well, we do in a certain way. Yeah. So how can we take this forward then? So, like, how can we take what we know about ancient tree worship and bring that into the context today here, specifically North America, understanding that in Europe there still is very much worship trees, whereas here it might be a little different. So here in Canada, you know, from a settler perspective, like from a settler mindset, if you will, there are a lot of significant trees in various communities or settlements. Some of them were like at town centers, town squares, meeting places, especially also if, you know, if you were traveling and you carved your name in a tree or so and so, like those trees, the moment, and don't do it, it's horrible. Do not carve your initials in a tree. It's horrible to do so. I've done it, but it's actually not really good. But that tree, immediately, the moment your initials go into that or some marking, that tree means something, you know, from that point on. So yeah, we can actually move that forward. So what I recommend is, you know, it doesn't have to be on private land. It could be public land, if you will. Go out in nature on a little walkabout, a little journey, if you will. Maybe I shouldn't say walkabout. I'll say a little journey. Let yourself be guided by kind of like just open yourself up to the mystical, right? Like, just be like, I'm going on a journey. I'm walking this way. And at some point, you may come across a tree that just has a really good vibe, a good aura about it, right? And then from there, introduce yourself. I'm so and so. You know, you're the tree here that I've found on my journey. You know, introduce yourself. Give it an offering. Do not stick metal implements or things or coins or like drive a nail into the tree. Like, we're really trying to get away from doing that to trees. And also, like, don't there are healing trees like in France, like les arbres à clous, where people will tie clouty ties, you know, to trees. Very bad as well. But while you're at the tree, you can give an appropriate offering, which is A, biodegradable, 2, don't pour sugary stuff on the tree, like you'll just mess with its development. But yeah, if you have a a little piece of fruit, dried fruit, maybe something that's biodegradable, water as well, just go introduce yourself, do a little something, and then every time you go back or you go near, you speak to the tree, you talk to it, you tell it things, and it'll tell you things. There is a Irish story that I learned recently, and I know this, but it was fine. It all ties in, and I forget the myth itself or the story. So correct me if you know it. But there was a king that had horses or asses' ears, and nobody knew except for the barber. And the barber was told to not say anything about the horse ears. And the barber was going nuts because the people should know that the king has horse ears. So he went to the woods, he found a tree, and he spoke into the tree that the king has horse's ears. But that tree witnessed everything about it all the time, right? And the tree started to wither away and kind of die and whatever. And like a while later, someone was looking for wood to make a harp, used it from that tree, made the harp, and every time they played the harp, the harp would say, "The king has horse's ears." Right? So, yeah. So, but yeah, speak to the tree, and and be open to listen. It's a confidant. Like the trees are witnesses. They hear our words. They take our vows. If there's like justice, like the court lindens, the court trees where people were tried or unfortunately capitally punished. Those trees saw things. So that's what I recommend. Find a cool tree, talk to it, and offer to it, and yeah, move on from there. Yeah. And wait, one last one, and then we will wrap up.
It's not a question, it's just an observation with all the questions and the relationships. It just sounds like we've been stewards of trees for so long that we shouldn't stop that tradition that is beyond ages of time. And by even meeting and offering and introducing a name, it's creating that relationship that's always existed within the seasons, right? They grow and they die and they rejuvenate every year. Well, here in winter. And again, so it just seems like very symbolic of our life cycle and also their life cycle. Seems very Venn diagram like they're very intertwined. It just seems like it'd be a benefit to us to continue to be great stewards of the trees and of the land, to continue our own ecosystem, because if we stop doing it, there's going to be a direct impact on the ecosystem of the trees that have intrinsically worked together for so long, that it would be a dire impact if we stop being stewards of the land and offering, not just casually breaking a branch because you need a stick. It's offering and asking,
Yeah.
and treating them like a being. And I think that's a great gem to take from this wonderful workshop. And I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Is fostering that relationship like they're part of the family. I know we do at home, and it's just great to see also the stewards of the land here continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's a very important takeaway. We always had a relationship with the trees. We turned our backs on them. They did not turn their backs on us, right? And let us return back to some of that understanding to now adjust our interactions with the trees in a more positive way. Absolutely. Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming to the workshop. If you have any other questions, comments, or whatever afterwards, I will never stop talking about it. So thank you.